The way shame is often spoke about is, I am a bad person. I don't like myself. I hate myself. I suck, blah, blah, blah. And I know as high achievers, we don't say that very often. We love who we are. We admire our skill set. We feel very empowered, very capable, very resourceful. Our shame is different. Our shame is, oh God, nobody can find out. Oh God, will people think this and this about me if they know the truth, right? So it's this very convoluted, I have to hide this, otherwise I'll be annihilated. It's more than just shame. It's, this can't come out. Like there is no way anybody can find out about this. And that is a heavy amount of shame. Hello, everybody. I am here with Kim Litton. Kim is a recent author, right? Kim, when did the book go live?
December.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So fresh off the press. I love it. I'll have Kim kind of talk to you about her book towards the end of the episode. And there'll be a link in the show notes for those of you who want to purchase it or give it to somebody that you know and love. But Kim and I, we're going to talk about a pretty cool topic today. That topic is, for lack of a better word, shame. But I think shame is different for high achievers and entrepreneurs. I think the type of shame we feel is very, very, very unique. Kim, I'm going to actually have you tee it up because you were the one who kind of came up with this. And you can speak personally if you want. But when we're talking about this unique kind of feeling that you get when you're an entrepreneur, I'll have you go first, and I'll go second. But man, when you are faced with something like this, you kind of deal with the traditional shame I think that everybody else deals with, but we have a whole nother layer of shame on top of that. Articulate for you what that felt like and what you've seen with your clients.
Absolutely. And this started with, you asking me what I was passionate about. And I'm like, gosh, a lot of things, that pertains to sex addiction recovery. But probably the cornerstone of that, or that I am passionate about. And I just want to divulge and disclose my story a little bit there by explaining I was a clinical director of a treatment center, a licensed therapist in active sex addiction. So as I'm doing my profession and very much, teaching women how to love themselves and respect themselves and, doing groups on women, and like self-worth and things like that, then I'm going to the bathroom and acting out. Mm-hmm. And whether it be with film, or whatever, but in my addiction, I was acting out. So that brings a whole nother level. Just like you said, the addiction itself is a very shameful place, and the shame kind of pushes the gas pedal on the addiction, and the addiction pushes the gas pedal on the corruption and the consequences, right? But when you are running a facility, when people are depending on you to run their company, as in my case, and to not just run their company, to be the clinical voice, to be the everything for their company, and you are doing such a naughty, I guess, just raising eyebrows, act, taboo, whatever you want to call it. That is another level of shame that's just, what comes up for me was imposter syndrome. It came, I'm not worthy. How could I do this? I have everything, I have all the answers. Yeah, I have none of the answers. Those are the things that I love to talk about. And I don't think it's spoken about enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's I remember, the first time I dealt with this was after I sold my first company. I got more money than I ever thought I would have, let alone at that age. Right. And so here I am, I sell. And in the months to follow the sale, those were probably the darkest months. And when I, just from a just lost, depressed, no joy. No fulfillment. It was a really tough time when that happened, and I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. And fast forward, to being discovered in my sex addiction by my wife, very similar thing, right? It's like, oh, this can't happen to someone like me. And what are the consequences going to be, right? So if I do tell people, Is anyone going to have me, anyone going to take me seriously? Am I ever going to be any sort of position of influence and guiding, leading, directing people? I think this shame does need to be talked about, because as a high achiever, you don't get to have problems. And I know that's ridiculous, because no one's telling you that you don't have to have problems. No one's saying that you can't. There's actually a litany of people who are very successful who have admitted that they have problems. But all in all, it doesn't change the fact that there is this belief that I don't get to have problems. If I do have problems and people do find out, that I'm going to lose this ability to be able to do the thing that I love to do. I mean, there's a lot at stake. And so I think it is a topic that we need to speak to, because one thing we do know for sure is that in the presence of shame, especially shame in the way that we're talking about it, recovery is impossible. I've even heard people say it's impossible to connect in the way that an addict needs to connect when they're dealing with that much shame. Because again, just to kind of define for the audience, right? Brene Brown kind of defines it really well, right? Guilt being I did something bad, shame being I am a bad person because of the things that I've done, right? So for the audience listening, that's kind of what we determine is shame. The way I always say it is shame is now an identity. Shame is I am bad because of the things that I have done. Only a bad person would do that. And I just want to explain one last thing too, is the reason shame halts recovery, halts connection. It's this simple. It's not rocket science. From a connection standpoint, who would want to hang around or connect with a bad person, right? So that's why it kills shame, is you're really holding this thing inside of you, that this belief that, there's this secret that if everyone knew, they wouldn't want to connect with you, right? So that's how it blocks connection. How it blocks recovery is this simple. I mean, if you're a bad person and that's who you are, why even bother recovering, right? If you're a bad person, like screw it, right? Might as well just go all in and say, whatever, I'm just gonna stay in my addiction then, because I'm bad at my core. I just want to speak to those two issues. But go back to you, Kim, when we're talking about this, let's kind of go to really accepting the fact that you actually have a problem. What happens when you don't want to have a problem, and why do high achievers not want to have a problem? What's your answer to that? Because I know for me, when I found out about this, I'm like, no. I don't want a problem, and I certainly don't want this problem.
Yes, right. Well, this problem in particular, I think, carries a huge stigma. And as our society has grown in the years, but it hasn't grown that much, it still carries a huge stigma. So that in and of itself. But what was your first question? I'm sorry.
Well, no, I actually really like that. And I want to emphasize that for everybody is because society tells you that cheaters are either inconsiderate people who are just too cowardly to leave their partner, or you're just an asshole and you straight up just don't care about your commitments to other people. If those are the only two reasons that someone would cheat or lie,
right,
then yeah, it's really tough to admit that, because it's like, well, A or B doesn't apply to me. So I don't really want to admit this at all, because if those are the only two options for what I am, I'm neither of those. So I'm just going to keep this hidden and keep it to myself.
Keep it hidden. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And just the shame too of, oh gosh. I mean, I know personally when it's important to know I'm a sex addict in recovery, and I also married a sex addict. And I did not know, this isn't something that, I was twisting my evil mustache trying to, make all this happen. We married, we were very much in love, and we wanted a family, and we were in our 20s. And so it was time to do so. But once I found out he was, for him, his acting out looked like prostitutes and pornography. And so I immediately started projecting my own shame and my insecurities and my own shame onto him. So I would call him names. He was a pervert. He was embarrassing. I wouldn't let him bathe our daughter. I mean, I went to this way other extreme of just shaming him, which is just horrible, because it's how I felt society would look at him. It's how I felt inside of me. I was, so shameful. So I I do want to say there's that level too of like, oh my God, I'm not like that. I'm not a
Mhm.
pervert. I'm not like someone who would harm a child. I'm not someone
Mhm.
who would harm, I just cheated on my wife a few times and or
Mhm.
something, whatever else, you get into that denial and then the justification of it all. And boy, does that not just protect that addiction so much because you're not as bad as a creep,
Mhm.
pervert,
Mhm.
but you're also separating yourself from the like camaraderie or whatever you will, from just, hey, we've got a common issue here,
Mhm.
and that's the sex addiction. And really, sex addiction boiled it down all the way down. We have an intimacy disorder. We have a problem and a disorder of like connection and really being able to connect on a an intimate level. If we're looking at it that way, that takes all that like shame
Mhm.
and dirtiness out of the
Mhm.
picture, right? And we can then look at it with compassion.
Mhm. Well, I think I'd love to park there because I do think that that topic deserves more attention because I do think one challenge with this, and it's really hard to recover, both as an addict and also heal the marriage if you're trying to stay together.
Mhm.
Um, it's really hard to become a not to get sober, and it's really hard for you and your wife to kind of get past this if the significance is, hey, you did this because you're bored with my body. You think I'm too old. You don't value our marriage. You're a pervert. You think less of women. If those are the conclusions that we are drawing from these behaviors, I mean, it's tough for both parties to think about it, right? If you're being told, hey, you did this for these reasons, and you as the addict know, like, no, I didn't. Like,
No, I
I
didn't.
love, like, I've said this before on other podcasts, but it's always worth saying. It is not uncommon for the men in my recovery groups. Their wife is the most attractive woman that they've been with, and all the other women they've acted out with are less attractive,
Yes,
and worse in bed.
100%.
Right. So, right.
100%.
So my point is, we have to just it pays dividends for both the addict and
Yeah.
the partner to stop for a second and just be like, hey, we can make up stories all day long about why this happened and what the significance of this is, but come on, let's, like, why believe things that aren't true? And if it's not true and it's just torturing the two of you and preventing you from healing, why are we believing something that's not true? Let's get down to the facts of really why this happened. Now, I want to take the woman's side for a second. I definitely am. I'm not saying that I disagree with you jumping to the conclusion that he is bored in the marriage, that he is not enjoying the sex with you, that he may think you're too old, too fat, too boring. Like, I get why you would jump to that conclusion. It's just, I'll just tell you from personal experience, I would say 95, not, I don't even say that. I would say 99.9% of the guys I talk to, it
Mhm.
is never because they're unsatisfied in their marriage.
Mm.
That's not the reason they do it. So I do want to give that some attention. The other thing that I would love to talk about, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, Kim, is how do we make this, like, let's start with the couples themselves. Like, how do we look at this in a healthier way so that we can recover? Because I think you and I both have dealt with this in our relationships. What do we do to look at this in a way that makes it healthier for both parties to navigate? Because I do think when it's
100%.
loaded with all of the judgments and the labels, it becomes very difficult for both partners to navigate. What in your experience, how can we look at this in a, I don't know, more of a productive way?
Oh, I love that because my whole, and that's the topic of today anyway, is the to de-shame it. And how do we de-shame? I mean, it's a great word, right? But like, how do we de-shame this? And it's really by getting both parties on board to really be educated, first of all, about this disorder or about this addiction, both parties. And again, for the wife, your audience must be male sex addicts, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
for the wives or the partners
Mhm.
to be educated on the addiction itself, like it had very little to do with you, very little. Now, I know I was quiet when you said it was 99.9% of the men though. And I do want to say some of the partners, this is just coming from a female perspective. Some of the partners have been told by their husbands,
Yes,
if
yes,
you
yes,
would just
yes,
have more sex with me. Now,
yes.
we want to preface that by saying that was in his addiction. Those are all of the things that he
I was going to
was.
say, fast forward, how many of them
Yeah.
is that their deepest regret is that they blamed their partner? 100%
Okay.
of
Yes.
them.
Okay. Good. But I
Because that
just
is
wanted to give
common.
that little nugget.
I do want to speak to that. That is very common.
Yeah.
I would say 1 in 4, if not 50% of guys initially blame the partner in some way. And that is, but to your point, 100% of them regret saying that, because as they learn more about why this happened, it was a very convenient story to put the blame onto somebody else. But when we learn the truth, it's like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
not the
And
truth.
that's the beauty of accountability and honesty, right? Is that, now I can just look at it and be like, oh, that was me, my addiction. And so what was I saying? Oh, to educate the partner that it really has nothing to do with her, the amount, what she looks like, what she did, what she didn't do. Little to do. However, her healing is her responsibility. You know what I mean? And so her healing from this is her responsibility. His healing cannot be her healing. His accountability and honesty and trust building is built in his recovery plan with you. But she needs to go over here and get her own set of first aid kit and get her own, triage going on here, whether it be her own podcast and books, a therapist, and but also to get a therapist who is able to not be so biased.
Yeah.
It's very important to see it from the addict, from an addiction educated perspective, because if the therapist is biased and like, oh, he cheated, leave him, that can be a real problem there,
And we see that, that's one of the tough things with this issue is, they don't talk about it in school.
No.
It's an afterthought of, one paragraph maybe in one book that says, oh, hey, by the way, there's sex addiction. This is kind of how it goes. And there's this and this and this, and then it's over. Right. And so unless they are a CSAT or they have invested in some sort of post graduate training, a lot of people, unless you've been, and I would also say too, I'm going to ruffle some feathers when I'm saying this, but this problem, Kim, is so complex, so unique, so painful, so hard. To me, if you have not been personally affected by this, either a betrayed or addict, to me, I don't know what business you have helping people, because I can't imagine how any amount of schooling could ever help you understand what it's like to be in this. I saw you sassy snap. What's that snap all about?
I've 100 wholeheartedly agree with this. And, I started this work in substance use disorder, and then it kind of morphed with my own acting out behaviors. I was just like shocked that my tolerance, the risky behavior reached higher and higher. The withdrawal was there. I mean, all of the signs of a heroin addict I was experiencing as a freaking sex addict. I was like, oh my God. Now, not as physical. I mean more emotional. And it was physical to some. The anxiety and all the things were very physical, but I was experiencing that. So I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to go get a certification for this. Because it's like I had learned and I knew about substance use, but I did not know. I mean, I had learned about, but just like you said, we don't learn a whole lot about process addictions and like the toll that it takes. So 100%. So when you find somebody who has been through it and who has really worked on it too, and overcome it and come to the other side, then you want to stick to that person. I mean, you grab onto them like nobody's business, because that's where it's at.
Yes, it is 100%. And I think you hit on something that I talk about on my podcast all the time. It's all over. It's the core of my book that I wrote. And that's the concept that this is process addiction. I think people need to stop and understand that, there's this, I think the problem with calling it sex and porn addiction is that society, especially the partners who are not addicted, they have this misconception that you are going to go through withdrawal and detox and that you're going to be fine and you'll come out of rehab and you'll never screw up again. And there are guys who come out and act out the day they get out of their rehab center. There are guys, I personally went, I don't know if you went to treatment. I went to treatment and I got out, and I'll be the first to admit, when I got out, I was just as much of an addict as when I got in. Now I was smarter. I was more aware. I was more equipped of how, but I mean, this concept of shipping your husband off for 5 weeks and having this problem be out of out of sight, out of mind, you guys are okay. Again, process addiction, it's unique to every individual. No person has the same process. And so I'm telling you, there is not a program in the world that you could ship your husband off to and he would become cured, because unless that program was custom curated for him, from everybody meeting his parents and talking and reading his journal entries and saying, okay, I know this guy, we're going to create a custom program for his process addiction, which obviously that program doesn't exist, but you can't just ship him off to a cookie cutter place and have his unique process addiction go away. But Kim, how would you explain the complexities? Because you're very familiar with both substance and process. Why can't we treat process addiction with the same copy and paste methods that we can substance addiction?
Right. Well, and I even kind of argue to this side of it with substance use as well, because I think so much process addiction is in that as well. But so that's another podcast, Roland. So what do I think? So I just want to say one of my acting out partners picked me up from the airport from treatment. So just to tell you how I was absolutely acting out on my way.
Picked you up from treatment. That's funny.
Picked me up from the airport. Yeah. I'm like, I need a ride.
I need a ride.
Of course. Like, he's the only person in the whole wide world, that I could get a ride from. So that just shows you how. But yep, exactly. I was way more educated. I knew more about myself. I think treatment's wonderful, but to expect it to do like a magic wand type of change is, and I get the hope that partners have, and really the addicts as well. And I don't want addicts to be like, well, screw that. If I'm going to go to treatment, I want to be well. You will learn a lot. You will gain a lot of knowledge. You will. And most importantly, you'll be separated from your world for a minute so that you can get breath and kind of get some insight. But I will say, with process addiction, what constitutes recovery and process addiction is the intensity, the frequency, and the length of time spent acting out lessons and lessons over time. I'm not saying that as a get out of jail free card of like, oh, you can go out as long as you're reducing your frequency and length of time. I don't mean it like that, because when you're and I think your listeners understand it, like when you're actively working on yourself, that doesn't come up. What does come up is, I don't like how I'm feeling inside. I want this to go away. I want this to go away. I want excitement. I want a dopamine hit. I want, and so therefore, when you're in recovery from this, your thinking patterns start shifting and changing. Whereas with chemical addiction is exactly that. Your brain has a chemical reaction due to the chemicals that you are taking. So if you are an alcoholic, your brain literally hardwires to need and want alcohol. Period. End of story. Your reward system is like, give me alcohol, give me alcohol, So similarly, very similarly, our brains get that way and want the dopamine and want the dopamine and want the dopamine. It's not from a substance.
Mhm.
So it can be from flirting with the girl at the restaurant,
Mhm.
you know. It can also mean, you know, hiring a sex worker
Mhm.
to please you. It can go on the spectrum, right? Of
Mhm.
like just flirting. It can go even in fantasizing. I
Mhm.
can get
Oh, and
very
even more, even let's even remove it from sex. You can go shopping with the intent of enhancing your appearance and getting a
correct.
new outfit. Could be part of the same process of, okay, I'm going to get this outfit. I'm going to wear it to this thing on next Friday. And when I wear it, I'm going to have people look at
Mhm.
me, admire my shoes, admire, so
Right.
again, I think that's the thing about process addiction that people don't understand is it's this convoluted game you play in your head around getting this thing that you want. And, for me, it was a lot of attention, validation. I wanted to feel superior. I wanted men to wish they could be me. I wanted women to wish they could be with me.
Yeah.
And that was my addiction. The
Yes.
sexual stuff just was happening in the midst of it all, but I
Yeah.
wasn't a real, that's why I've never really identified with the term sex addict
Got it.
is,
Mhm.
the sex happened and it started happening more
Same.
often. Yep.
Mhm.
But there were for years, I was able to stop it at purely just getting attention and validation.
Yep.
Then one day I drank too much and broke the seal. And then it was kind of all downhill from there. Once you do it once, it becomes really easy to do again and again and again. But again, I think the highlight of what Kim and I are talking about here is you need to be hunting your process. You need to get out of shame, because when you're in shame, really you can, like I said, the two things that you need most, which is recovery and connection, you're literally not going to be able to get. And so as a high achiever, do not underestimate this different kind of shame, right? The way shame is often spoke about is, I am a bad person. I don't like myself. I hate myself. I suck, blah, blah, blah. And I know as high achievers, we don't say that very often. We
Say
love
that.
who we are. We admire our skill set. We feel very empowered, very capable, very
Absolutely.
resourceful. Our shame is different. Our shame is, oh God, nobody can find out. Oh God, what would happen if, will people think this and this about me if they know the truth, right? So it's this very convoluted, I have to protect this I have to hide this, otherwise I'll be annihilated. So it's like, it's more than just shame. It's, this can't come out. Like there's no way anybody can find out
No.
about this. And that is a heavy amount of
Yeah.
shame. Would you agree?
Yes. Wholeheartedly. I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
And, how do we reduce that shame is really and truly by talking about it in safe places.
Correct.
Right. And hearing other stories and things like that in safe places, reading book. That's why I wrote my book too, is
Mhm.
like, I wanted other people would, um, refer books to me to read, and I was like, "Oh my god, I did that on like a Tuesday morning."
Mhm.
Like that felt like so elementary to me, yet it didn't even puncture the shame that I was feeling, because
Mhm.
it seemed like no woman was writing about this. And
Mhm.
so I said, "You know what? I have to face that shame." It took me 5 years to write this darn thing because I had to face so much shame, but it's like, I hope that others can be freed from that shame too, of like, um, just feeling it's a very lonely place to be
Mhm.
in that shame, like, nobody can find this out. Yet
Mhm.
it held me such prisoner too, and it's like, "But I don't wanna do this anymore," you know?
So let's use the remaining time we have together to talk about shame reduction strategies. We both just talked about one, right? My favorite is, and this has a ton of evidence, right? Which is connection. We all know that. And I think the reason why peer support and connecting and really finding a tribe of people to do recovery with is so important. It really is for this shame reduction piece. Now, that
Mm,
doesn't mean you don't need to be going to therapy on top of that, because you do. That doesn't mean that you need, but the reason connection gets so much hype within the sex addiction, porn addiction field is
Mhm.
it truly is the gatekeeper. I mean, it just,
It really is.
it opens the door you need to get into. And so many guys, especially high achieving guys, they hear that and they're like, yeah. I'll do everything else but the connection piece. That's what I said. Like, come on, I don't need to talk to a bunch of addicts. What are they going to possibly tell me that will help me? Now, one thing I want to speak to with that too is it's got to be real connection, guys. If you are just going to the group therapy or just going to the 12-step meeting or getting on the Zoom, that's not connection. That is called going to a meeting. Like, connection is, I understand you and I feel like you understand what it's like to be me. Like you feel, what it's like to own 6 businesses. You know what it's like to have everyone, hey, did you buy a new house yet? Where'd you go? So, all the expectations that everybody has of a high achiever, right? Oh, hey, we're going to come over. Are we going to go to Hawaii this year? Are we going out in your boat this year? Right? There's these pressures, right? And so when I go to 12-step, I think I need people to understand like what it's like to be me. Like, I don't think they understand the pressure that I have put myself under to perform. And so again, there's all these things that go into truly connecting with another person. And I just encourage all of you guys, it's not just going to meetings. It is finding someone who becomes a friend. I mean, like truly somebody that like you enjoy, you feel good every time you talk to them. You feel energized, you feel mentally stimulated, you feel you're excited to recover when you talk to these people. That's connection. And if you guys don't have that, this whole process is extremely, extremely difficult. It makes it really hard to recover in that place. So that's my one piece of advice is I don't even like to call it connection. I say tribe. Find your tribe of men to recover with. Find your tribe. I cannot emphasize that enough. Kim, what's your recommendation or recommendations for shame reduction?
Yeah, I love that because absolutely 100% what you're saying. The connection with others is going to teach you connection with yourself, which is so important to your own recovery and knowing who you are inside. Because, we're used to like, well, whoever you see is who I am. I'm a guy who owns 6 businesses.
I'm perfect. I don't make any mistakes. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm perfect. So
I'm like, mistakes, what are those? Right. Exactly.
Right. But connecting with other men, like you say, is leading to that connection with self. And then when we have a real strong and firm connection with ourselves, we don't necessarily need to find it in the means of the unhealthy reward system, right? I also want to stress too is, getting your tribe together, but also connecting and working on connecting with your partner. I think that's such a huge thing. And I love to see it in the men that I work with and in the 12 steps around here, or even the men's sex addicts group that I have had experience with. When they start connecting with their partner, it brings a softness to them that is just like so needed, I feel like, and like so beautiful, like a vulnerability, not a song, I guess, same word, right? But it does bring like a vulnerability. So when you find that you can be vulnerable with her and she's safe, right? This happens together. This does not happen you doing the work. She needs to connect as well. So you guys are connecting together. That brings that shame down so much to to where it's like then you have like now you have a partner. I mean, what's a partner? A partner. What's your business partner? He's your partner. He has half the stake in your company. Your partner is your wife who has half the stake in your marriage, and you guys are wanting the same goal. So to have that purpose and that goal and to be really like zoned in, to be really clear about it, right? And what we want, I think is so important to the de-shaming. But shining the light into the darkness is the start.
And I think that's what a good peer support group will do is it teaches you to articulate your unique process addiction in a way that really allows the marriage to start to heal. Because I think the barrier is, and you, I'm sure you've heard it from so many betrayed partners. Are you even in good recovery? Do you even know why this happened? Are you even doing anything to change it? Right. And those are all very valid questions. And I think it really puts guys in a position, because guys go, well, I'm going to, 2 12-step meetings a week. I'm going to therapy once a week. We're doing couples therapy yep. And they're like, well, what do you mean am I in good recovery? I'm doing this workbook and that workbook, and I'm doing this intensive in the fall. Right. And you know what I realized though, because my wife asked me the same thing when I was early in recovery. She was asking me, hey, and she actually said it differently. She goes, Roland, I don't think you're in good recovery. And I inhaled to defend myself, and then I stopped, only because I was doing Carol's book moments before she walked in. So I stopped and I thought to myself, okay, Roland, she's entitled to her opinion. And, instead of defending myself, you know what happened? I had this feeling in me, and I said, you know what? I said, you're right. You've seen me grow businesses before that were really hard. You've seen me, as an entrepreneur, she's seen me do really hard stuff, really, really hard stuff before. And I asked myself, am I approaching my recovery with the same tenacity that I did all those other businesses that I grew, right? And she had a really great point. Because she's witnessed me go after something that was really important to me. She saw this and she's like, he's not trying as hard as he can. I know what that looks like, and this isn't it. Now, she's right. Here's in my defense, though, I didn't know how to try harder, because I thought I was doing everything. I mean, literally, each week I was probably doing 15 hours of different recovery things. Like, that's a ton of time. Like I thought, hey, what more do you want? Here's the thing though, because I didn't really know what my process addiction was, it was just kind of like, I'm not going to do sexual stuff anymore. And that she just wasn't buying that, because she's like, yeah, I know, but I think you knew that before and you still did it anyway. So she's like, why did this really happen? And I think that is one thing, Kim, that I think a good peer support group will do for you, is it gives you the ability to really articulate your unique process addiction to your wife so that she can understand, oh, this actually isn't as sexual as I thought. This is coming from this is this huge game that he plays every day of his life. I always tell my wife, I say, shoot, sex is my second. I would way rather do it through work and getting accolades and winning awards at work. I love that way more than sexual attention. But sometimes it's hard to win awards at 11 p.m. on a Thursday when you're traveling across, And so how can I get that hit without doing something impressive? I can go and try to convince a woman to sleep with me, right? And it's really sad, but that's kind of the core of it. But Kim, as we're leaving our listeners today with something they can do to conquer shame, but also take that next step too and better understand the why behind their process addiction, what advice would you give men?
To better understand the why, again, I go back to the vulnerability, and I know it's so hard for your clientele and your audience.
I'm going to say, come on, you're a woman. You're a woman, Kim. You don't know what it's like for us. Yeah.
No, seriously. But I feel like education, whether that be with someone like you, to be like, yo, you've been through it before. You are one of me. Let me talk to you more about this to better understand themselves, right? Because I had to intellectualize it before I could start working. That was for me personally, and I'm not even a man, so I can only imagine what it's like for you guys. But I had to intellectualize it before I could emotionalize it, basically. So I had to really buy into, damn, this is a problem. This really is something. So so the way that I wanted to do it was learn. Like, why am I so screwed up? Hence the reason I do what I do.
But Kim, I think that is a good gateway into being vulnerable, because I think it's really tough to be vulnerable when you don't know what to be vulnerable about. And I think that's where reading a lot of these books and listening to podcasts can kind of teach you about, hey, this is nothing to be ashamed of here. One thing I want to tell everybody is, nobody in the sex addiction field, well, that's not true because there's a ton of very purity culture within this field, but nobody should be telling you that what you're doing is weird or makes you a freak. Because the truth is, there really should be no debate as to why you want to look at naked women and why you want to have novel sexual experiences. Who doesn't? Like that, of course you do. It's part of your biology and your DNA. That's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, how do you act in line with your values? How do you not do things that your kids would be ashamed of if they knew you were doing this, right? To the point where your kids would never speak to you again and your wife would leave you and never speak to you again. How do we remove that aspect, right? The deception, the sneaking around, the paying for sex, the risky sex. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. We're not demonizing your desire. We're just simply talking about, hey, if you're going to have a monogamous relationship and you're going to raise children in a safe environment, engaging a lot of this behavior isn't part of that recipe. So I like how you framed that. I think that's what some of the education does, is it shows you, hey, you're actually not weird. That was the whole concept of writing my book was, guys, this really isn't that weird. It actually makes a ton of sense in the United States in 2025, why you would do these things. It makes a ton of sense. Now, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just making a ton of sense. Now, if readers were going to purchase your book, who's your target audience? But what was the energy behind the book and what can they expect to learn from it?
Oh, thank you for asking. My book, the target audience is probably, I would say, more females who struggle with sex and love addiction, as well as chemical addiction. My story. So my book is my story, basically. It's a memoir. So I walk you through my childhood of growing up in a very small, tiny hometown through my addiction to substances. I walk you through my childhood of being raised in, a home where dad's having affairs, mom's, the anxiously attached, lots of domestic violence, things like that. Then I walk you through my teenage years where I was introduced to sex and drugs and, loved every minute of that. And then in my 20s where it was very destructive for me. Got clean and sober, married, had children, successful, beautiful life. And then that crumbled. So I'm walking you through my story. Really, again, it's a lot of de-shaming. I'm putting all of my stuff out there to help the other person, not just de-shame, but like connect a lot of dots too. I've heard a lot of women give me feedback like, wow, you really gave that part of me a voice. And I didn't know that existed before. Things like that. And that's what I mean too by, before you go and talk to another man about your problem, you might just be like needing podcasts and books right now because like this feels very shameful, right? So I need to read books and listen to podcasts to try to, like, I'm not crazy. This isn't. And so, yeah, that is really why I wrote my book and for my specific gender, because I feel like there's not a lot out there for us.
Oh yeah, especially for female sex addicts. Oh my goodness. And the numbers are rising, The last thing I saw is they're now estimating that it's probably conservatively closer to 10% of females, right? And so this is not a small number, right? 1 in 10 who are struggling with compulsive sexual behavior. I know these poor women get left out of this often because yes, technically more men struggle with this, but women should not be left out of it by any means. So I really appreciate that you wrote this book. And I love the energy that you put behind it because it's the same energy for me. Thank you. Guys, and for everybody listening, you're not weird. There are so many reasons why you would do this. We live in the most sexual culture ever. Sex is used all the time to sell everything. Guys are even, it's a trophy to display on your wall if you're able to sleep with X number of attractive women, right? So, this is in our country, this is in our culture. So for everybody listening, especially the high achieving men and entrepreneurs listening, shame is real. Shame will block your recovery. Shame will keep your addictive behavior parked right where it's at. So and again, if you think you're not experiencing shame, because a lot of high achievers do, because you guys live pretty amazing lives, think again, because again, shame isn't I'm a bad person, woe is me, I can't do anything right. It's not this depressive sob story. Shame is any idea of I can't let anyone find out about this. And if they do, or now that my wife knows about this, oh my gosh, she's no longer seeing me as the guy that I always want my wife to see, right? All that stuff's got to go. You guys have got to clear all of that stuff out. There is a version of you that doesn't struggle with this, and all you need to focus on right now is becoming that version of yourself. Yes. Kim, any last minutes of encouragement for our audience?
Oh, guys, just keep it going. You know, don't give up on yourself. I know you won't because you're high achievers, but no, I mean, I just love everything that you said there, Roland, like your little pep talk to them. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. I do want to say though that, yeah, the shame just looks different for you, but it is there. So just be honest with yourself so that you can get down in there and stop blocking your recovery. Exactly.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thanks, Kim.